Hi Ella, how are you doing this afternoon even?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. We have a lot of questions for you today, so let's jump right on in. One of the things I've been thinking about when listening to your music was the question of what comes first to you. Is it the lyrics, the melody, or the chord progression? Or is it something else that just inspires you and just triggers the whole creative process?
I think it really depends on, day to day and song to song. Generally, I'm quite led by melody, but I also love lyrics and words. But I kind of can't, once my brain starts working, I can't do one without the other. So even if I start off with like a lyric for a chorus or a top line, I could then have to fill in the gaps as soon as possible because I love the way that they all interact and how they influence each other. I feel like if I was to start with a set of chords and write the whole chordal structure of the song before I thought about lyrics at all or melody, then I'd be missing out on some maybe exciting collisions of ideas.
Cool. And do you find like could that they don't you don't want to separate them? Do you find that sometimes if you come up with a really cool lyrical idea, that the way you say it kind of can trigger the melody, or do you find that sometimes select word groupings or select word groupings kind of influence the direction that you want to go in, or do you find that sometimes you just kind of it's more like poetry where you have the lyrics and then you kind of sculpt them into the melody? Like what's the process there, or is it quite an organic process?
I think it's probably quite organic. I would always be wary personally of writing out all of the lyrics as in if it were a poem before I started the musical side of it, because like definitely in terms of syllables and even like the rhythm of the chords that you're playing, whatever the time signature is, that can really have an impact on how you perform that vocal or how those words sound, and vice versa. And I think it's really interesting to keep track of those things kind of side by side and see which is leading it. And a lot of the time if I'm stuck lyrically and I'm trying too hard and I get myself into a corner, I can just turn back to like the chordal structure, or maybe add in a new rhythm, and that will then sort of spark new ideas in the other elements of the song. But yeah, I definitely think it's quite organic. Whenever I try and work in like a structured way with writing when I'm creating, it never ends well. So I try and keep it as open as possible.
And what inspires you? Like what's your favorite tool or thing to do that inspires you to sit down and write a new song?
Most of the time it's thinking too much about my own life. Overthinking, definitely. Recently it's been conversations that I've had with friends and sort of trying to write as if I was experiencing their lives in their shoes in certain situations, which is quite nice because it gives you a lot of freedom that I may not feel that I have within myself to explore that story and maybe build it up and create a bit more of a world around it. But everything kind of, I'm always looking for inspiration, always.
And do you find that sometimes if you're overthinking, which sometimes we're encouraged against overthinking, aren't we? But do you find that when I suppose, I would say, would you not prefer to call that deep thinking then, if that's the case, because you're meditating on a story or a situation or circumstances that when meditating upon those things, they kind of can trigger the creative juices, and also I guess it helps you to sing songs with a measure of empathy as well, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Do you feel that deep thinking? It can be also difficult in the time we live in, that with the social media age where everything's like everybody wants everything now, the whole credit card thing, the whole rush in the creative process, that taking the time out kind of adds a layer of deepness to your music. Do you find that's the case? It's a long question.
I hope so. I think so. I spent an awful lot of time ruminating, probably too much. I like that you're saying deep thinking. I might steal that. But I just think it adds an element of like consideration and thoughtfulness. And like, I don't want to put anything out there into the world that I don't quite understand myself, because that's just a bit confusing. And I don't think you would feel authentic as an artist or a creator by not thinking about it on a deeper level. And that's when you find those lovely, even if it's just it evokes an emotion that you haven't felt before, or a little phrase, or maybe some words that you never thought would come out of your mouth. That all comes from mulling things over and thinking on them more deeply. So I think the deeper you go, often that's where the fun happens. That's where the excitement happens.
Brilliant. And when it comes to guitar parts, do you like to write using theory? Do you use your ears, or a combination of both?
So I am completely theory illiterate. I'm rubbish at it. I was always terrible at maths at school, and I learnt theory for a few years and I couldn't get the hang of it. And then my teacher said, "Oh, it's basically maths. It's easy." And I thought, "Oh, that's why I do numbers." So I approach everything through ear and sort of trying to use my instinct. But I have a very vague understanding of chords, and you know I know about it, but I don't use it as a basis to write. I just sit down, whether it's at a keyboard or with my guitar, and feel whatever feels right. Obviously, we know there are chords that go together well, and chord sequences, and there are certain bars, like the 12-bar blues. There are things that just work that we can lean on. But generally, I just like to see what happens. Spontaneity in writing.
So you have quite an organic process overall then, with both the songwriting aspect, but also the music writing aspect. When you're writing guitar parts, are you the sort of person who just like to sit down and play and see what you can discover? Or do you go in with a certain mindset of looking for something in particular?
I think I'm always trying to capture a mood, but that gives you so much room within the mood to find a part that works. So I generally just sit down and see what happens and see what comes out of me, or see what I can find. And a lot of the time it doesn't work and I'll need to go away. I think especially with guitar, I'm not the most accomplished guitarist, unlike yourself. So I often go between instruments working with the same chords to try and get more perspective and see the bigger picture with them all, I think. But yeah, guitar, I wish I could sit down and know exactly what I was doing, but I just don't. So I just have to sort of blindly explore.
Well, it works for you, because I was thinking you used the word mood, and I think you're very good at capturing certain vibes, and it's the storytelling aspect that comes with that can sometimes be, I think, if you overthink the theory side of things, you can lose that. And that's, for me, it's the soul of the music. I think everybody has to find an approach that's organic to them, and I think you found your approach. And I was thinking, as you were explaining it, it sounds more like musical exploration. You don't know what you're going to find. You're going in and seeing what comes out. And do you find that that's what keeps you excited about writing?
Yeah, I think so. I've managed to, and it doesn't always work, but generally over my career so far, I've managed to try and keep writing as an explorative process. Obviously, if I want to release an album, or if I want to release an EP, you need a certain number of songs and you have to fulfill a quota that you sort of set for yourself. But the more I try and approach it in a really practical way with rules and sort of expected results at the end of it, the more inhibited I feel to create. And I think just keeping it as open as possible and going in and just trying to capture something, whatever that is the most rewarding for me. And it's also nice to sit down and not know what will happen. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a song, or maybe you don't, maybe you write nothing, but you've tried. But you'll have something that you didn't even know existed this morning. So I'm a big believer into sort of tapping into your subconscious and just seeing what you need to express. And I think, as you said, like a lot of the time, those songs that capture that mood or have that depth to them are often the most satisfying. And I think if you try and write, maybe personally when I try and write from a place of theory and like rules and knowledge, I find that really limiting, and I want to hear a piece of music and make myself feel something rather than noticing, that time signature is this. But that's just my approach.
Brilliant. And do you ever write songs that just don't see the light of day?
Oh yeah, I'd say like maybe 9 out of 10 songs never see the light of day. In a week, if I write a song a day, if I write 7 songs in a week, maybe 2 or 3 will be good enough for anyone else to hear. But you sort of learn when you're being too harsh on yourself, and you need to learn when to censor it. But it's just practice. You just get a gauge of whether something is worthy or not. But sometimes you do need other people to dig up a song from a year ago that you just thought wasn't worth anything, and for them to see something and see a potential in it. But yeah, that's the thing that I always say to all the students on this course. When you're writing, even if you don't finish with a song that is like a number one single, you had to write that song to get to the next song, which might be that. So everything that you do is a really worthy and important step into crafting something you're really proud of.
Brilliant. Like it's part of the journey of the adventure, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And what about what particular things inspire you to write music? Is there, like, for myself, I love going for a walk in the woods. If I do that, I come home and I'm inspired right away. Do you ever like any things you do? My wife, she likes to make green tea, and by doing that, it kind of inspires her for some reason. What's your thing?
I think I'm a big fan of walking and getting out there as well. Oftentimes I need to change the setting of where I am, and that often entails being somewhere natural in the woods in a park, and sort of and feeling so small amongst the grandness of what's around me is really inspiring. And it just giving yourself the time to think and mull over what you might want to talk about when you're creating is a really important thing. So yeah, I'd say walking around, watching films, listening to more music as well. I just like to follow other people's leads and be inspired by what they've done, because you never copy them, but you'll be inspired by what they've created, and that's a really exciting thing.
I think that's a really healthy thing to say as well, because I think sometimes when people listen to other music, they can feel intimidated by it because, it's so good, I'll never be able to do anything like that. But the point is good. You should be able to, do your thing to that level. And I think, not wanting to copy is actually a healthy thing, because you develop you rather than emulate them. Did you ever, like in the past, struggle with those kind of feelings before?
Oh yeah, all the time. The amount of times I've written something that I thought was really good and I've had to send it to someone else to say, is this mine? Did I make this up? Does this already exist? But there's definitely a point, I think, in everyone's sort of artistic process where they don't quite feel like they have a grasp of who they are and what they want to write about yet. And what does that sound like sonically? What does the production sound like? And you have to explore that by looking outwards. There's only so much introspection you can do, I think, and you need to know what you don't like. And that often comes from listening to other people's music and taking influence from them, because even if you listen to the same 10 songs as somebody else does, and you both love the elements, the chord structures, the backing vocals, you have lived a completely different life to that person. You have a completely unique perspective on that music that you're listening to. So you can't ever really copy someone unless you're blatantly doing it. I think it's really exciting to look at the amount of music and materials that are around us for inspiration.
And what do you feel are the biggest challenges working in the music industry today?
Ooh, there's a few of those. I think the nature of the industry has changed so much in the last few years with streaming, with Spotify, these big streaming services. And I remember when they first came around, people would say, oh, this is just like a flash in the pan, they won't last. And now they have this monopoly over the music industry. So I think that instantaneous, really commercialised culture is quite limiting and damaging to young artists who might feel that unless they haven't written the best song of all time, they're never going to get a look in. And I think it also can be quite dangerous for more long form types of music and art, because more and more I'm hearing people at record labels who maybe aren't as in touch as they think they are, saying nobody wants to listen to albums anymore. People just want singles and maybe a B-side, maybe an EP, but that's anything more than that is too much for people to absorb and consume. But that's really limiting to people's creative process, and we want to encourage artists and musicians to spend as much time as they need on a project, because you can always hear that in the final product, I think. So that's definitely a tricky thing, the instantaneous nature of it. And I think a lot of young artists and people that are starting out in music don't feel like they'll ever have a chance, because there's like 60,000 songs minimum being uploaded a day to Spotify. How do you stand out when there is such a huge quantity and saturation of music?
That's a good point. Yeah. And how do you navigate that? Obviously, it's difficult to have a high output of quality. So, you can't break through with quantity, you have to break through with quality. But then when you get something that's of quality, how do you then get the ears on it? So what's your way of doing that?
I think the most important thing when you're thinking about that is all you can do. You can put advertising spends on your YouTube videos and social media posts, and you can find playlist editors, and you can find the right people. But if your music is of really good quality and you're really proud of it, that will always translate to people. So even if you have 500 followers on Instagram or like 20 monthly listeners on Spotify, if that music is of good quality, that will always reach the people that it needs to reach. And I know that's a bit of a blind sort of holistic way to look at the process, but I do believe that that is the most important thing. And then when you approach people, record labels, publishers, anyone, if you want to write for other people or play for other people, as long as you have that confidence and that belief in yourself, that's kind of infectious and people want to be part of that. But like you say, quality, and just keep on going. Send that email to someone that you think might never reply. It always pays off somehow.
Yeah, I like that. It's a very organic way of growing it, because I guess if you take that approach, you find your tribe, whether it's 5 people or 100 people, but it does grow because they also know people who like same kind of things. And before you know it, you have a following. But you have a following of people who like what you do, and you're not trying to fit in with the current trends or whatever. And you start your own trend. And I guess that organic approach to both your writing, to both your guitar playing and the writing and the instrumental side of things, but also the organic approach to what you could say the marketing is also a really good way of doing it. And then by taking that more, I'm using the word organic a lot, but I think it's a good description of your approach. You stay more true to your own personal identity, and you're not letting the social media world or the Spotify system of how things are done control you. And do you feel that having that mindset is a good thing for people to practice in terms of mental health? Because a lot of artists and musicians do tend to have issues with this, I think.
Absolutely. When you were saying that before, you mentioned I was going to try and bring it back to that, because I think at the end of the day, anyone that is creating music, the dream scenario is to have a sustainable career and have longevity. And you can only have that, I think, if you have a real firm grounding in what you want to put out there, in believing that you are good enough and that you're capable and that you're talented. And if you can keep up that consistency with your mental health and with your purpose and your feeling of worthiness, then that will just keep you going, no matter how many setbacks you might face, no matter how many record labels might not want to put out your music. If you really believe in it, then that is the key to sustainability. And yeah, a lot of creative people, I think because of the nature of our brains and how we work, really struggle with mental health, myself included. I've had massive issues with my mental health and depression the last few years. But music has been such a cathartic tool for me with working out and understanding it. But it's the most important thing, I think, when you're creating with your brain, to keep your brain healthy. That's a muscle that you use most, so you've got to nurture it. And I think that will stand you in really good stead.
Definitely, yeah. Couldn't agree more. So if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice, what would it be?
I think the main piece of advice I would give myself, and I don't know if I would believe it, was just trust your instinct. I spent a lot of time not knowing what my sound was, who I was as an artist, and a lot of people were pulling me in different directions, trying to mold me into something that was viral or trendy or not sustainable, and I didn't know who I was, and I didn't trust all of these inklings that I was having about that. So I just went with all these people who I believed knew better than I did. But you have to grab onto that artistic instinct that you have and really stand by it, even if you don't quite believe it. That is how you will feel authentic in what you do. Just trust your gut, trust your instinct. Always think about yourself first. Don't think that you owe a record label or a manager anything, because you work with them. You don't work for them. And this symbiosis and this communication and organic relationships are what will see you through, but you can only do that if you trust your own instinct. So that would be what I would tell my younger self.
Brilliant. And what advice would you have for those who look up to you and want to do what you do?
I think I would say just keep at it. It's not maybe that's not a very healthy way to see it, but consistency is really key, not just in the industry that we work in and the way that people consume music, but just for yourself and your own self-belief. Learn to do everything yourself if you can, if you have the time and the energy and maybe the finances. Learn to produce, learn to write, learn to mix, so that you can do that and you're not completely dependent on other people. And that means that when you do have the resources to get other people to help you with those things, you can be involved in it and you still have creative control over it. And that's something that I sort of refused to learn for quite a long time, because I thought, I'm a writer. I'm not good with technology, I don't produce. And that it was an inevitability that I'd have to learn, and I was pushing it off. But since I started to do that and I've learned to do all these things myself, I felt way more empowered in my music. I felt in control, and I've been really satisfied with my career. So I just think push away, work hard, understand everything that you can, and you will be so informed to go forward and be successful.
It's amazing, isn't it, when one steps out of their comfort zone, that confidence that you get learning new skills and that feeling of knowing that you're moving forwards and that you're able to bring something more to the table. Do you feel that the technical skills that you've learned along the way, do you feel that they have been a part of the reason for your current success?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. It's just the self-assuredness. I started releasing music when I was about 18, and I didn't have any experience of being in the studio, of working with producers. I didn't really know anything. So I always felt quite out of my depth and uncomfortable when I was sitting there trying to produce a song with someone, and I would not know any of the language, any of the lingo, and I would have an idea that I wouldn't be able to express. And so there was so many creative moments I had missed out on because I didn't know how to communicate it. And since I've been learning and teaching myself more technical aspects of music, there's just so much more excitement and so much more exploring that you can do with confidence, with this like technical know-how that you now have, to have an idea and see it through to fruition because you know how to do that. And I think it's quite freeing. Knowledge is really freeing, and the educational aspect of technology and music will just help you improve so vastly.
So what are your goals then? And what are you doing to help achieve those goals?
My biggest goal is longevity and having a sustainable career. I've managed to do it so far for about 8 years without being fully in it. And a lot of it was luck and amazing support from people. But I just really want to sustain my career, and I want to grow, and I want to be able to do this for the rest of my life if I can, and earn a comfortable living and continue expressing myself. It's such a privilege to do that, but it is a lot of work. It is a slog when you manage yourself and you do all the social media and you write and you're producing. It is a lot, but I think I'm trying to keep on top of it all, find new ways to be excited about music, and ask for help. Ask everyone around you if they have like a tiny bit of knowledge that you can take with you and grow. And I think just being aware of your goals as you move forwards. I've got a lovely big, huge teacher's journal and diary where I'm writing down all of my plans and trying to strategize and trying to expand. And I think that is how I will hopefully keep achieving the goals of sustainability in my career.
Very good. And so what does success look like for you then in the long term? I know you're talking about sustaining this, but let's say that's in the bag. What would be your long-term goal?
I used to be a lot more preoccupied with commercial success. I think that was a few years ago. That was the only way that you could succeed in music, is if you had millions of followers and everybody knew you and people were chanting your songs back at you. And while all of those things are great, and I would love to have that at some point, I've been in successful situations in my career and I haven't felt any ownership over my work, and I've been really dissatisfied and almost felt like a ghost in what I was doing. So I think just feeling confident and feeling happy with what I'm doing. And this is the thing with when you're creating anything, it's such a personal link to us and what we've experienced that when you fail or you don't succeed, it can feel like a really huge personal failure. And I don't want to feel that again. So I'm going to try and keep up the self-belief, and that success for me is just being happy and content and satisfied with what I do, because even when it gets really tough or you're snowed under with work, if you enjoy what you do and you're passionate about it, that always carries you over the finish line. So trying to keep that up is my success.
I think that's a perfect answer. I was hoping you would say that, because a lot of people, their goal is, the commercial success thing, but they're not happy a lot of the time, are they, those people? Because they're fitting into a mold that perhaps has been created for them by someone else. And I like that you're staying true to your, I'm going to say it again, the organic process of how you work. And it seems to me that the overthinking, you could say, or the deep thinking you've done throughout your career has helped you to navigate in a way that is authentic to where you want to go and how you want to get there. And I think that's a really good lesson for students, because I don't know if you feel the same way, but nobody can copy another one's pathway, and nobody can overly engineer their pathway, because you've got to work with who you are and what you have to work with. And do you feel that way?
Absolutely. I think it's really great to look around you and see people and artists and bands that you admire and aspire to be like, and kind of try and see how they did it and what goals were they reaching at what stages in their career. And it's really good to see that, so you have an awareness of what is possible. But as soon as you start comparing yourself or trying to follow the same path, I think you will inevitably be disappointed or feel quite put out when you don't achieve that impossible goal. Because of course you could never, you work in different circumstances, you make completely different music to this person. So why would you stitch yourself up and compare? I think approaching your work, feeling like you're doing a good job and just seeing what comes, that will be your path. And in hindsight, we look back and say, oh, that was my path. But when we're on the path, in the moment, we don't know what it looks like. It's just winding, and maybe you go up a really high hill and feel brilliant, and then you'll come crashing down. But that's all part of it, and you've got to take it in your stride. So owning the path and just being open to where it takes you is really important, I think.
I agree. And thank you so much for answering all of our questions today, and for taking the time out. And we look forward to seeing what you do. Where's the best place to listen to your work? Do you have a website?
I do. It's wildmusic.com. I'm on Spotify as well, Apple Music, Deezer. That's a thing now, apparently, again. Just type in Wilds, WILDES. And again, I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. But yeah, my music is on all the streaming services and on SoundCloud. So go and have a listen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.